America's sweetheart meets the underworld. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a Hollywood star. She was the embodiment of American fantasy. With her breathy voice, platinum hair, and disarming vulnerability, she became an icon the moment she appeared on screen. But beneath the makeup, diamonds, and soft lighting was a woman far more complex. Someone who had been abandoned as a child, used by studios, and manipulated by nearly every man in power she encountered. That same soft vulnerability that made the world fall in love with her also made her a target. By the early 1950s, Marilyn was everywhere. Magazine covers, movie posters, headlines. Her face sold millions in box office tickets, and anything she touched turned to gold. But that level of fame doesn't just draw fans, it draws predators. And in the case of Marilyn, it drew the attention of people far more dangerous than obsessive admirers. People who didn't want her love, they wanted her loyalty, her silence, her influence. At the time, organized crime wasn't just an underworld problem. The mob was everywhere, from Las Vegas casinos to Hollywood studios to even political campaigns. And the men who ran these syndicates were used to getting what they wanted. One of those men was Sam Giancana, a mob boss with a reputation for controlling women just as easily as he controlled politicians. Giancana wasn't content staying in the shadows. He wanted reach, and Marilyn was the perfect asset. A woman loved by the public, trusted by the elite, and connected to the highest levels of power. But Monroe wasn't aware, at least not at first, of how deeply she was being pulled into something far more dangerous than any studio contract. She began attending high-profile parties, mingling with men tied to crime families and backroom deals. Many of these connections were facilitated by her inner circle, including Frank Sinatra, who straddled both Hollywood and the mob with effortless charm. For Marilyn, it may have seemed like another Hollywood dinner party, but to the mob, she was something else entirely: leverage. By 1956, she was no longer just a movie star. She was a woman entangled in a web of unseen influence, admired by the public, used by the elite, and watched by forces she couldn't begin to understand. But the true danger? It wasn't just that Marilyn was loved. It was that she knew too much, and the wrong people were starting to realize it. And that's when one man decided she would either belong to him or no one. Sam Giancana wasn't your typical gangster. He didn't hide in alleyways or send messages through muscle-bound enforcers. No, he wore designer suits, hosted private parties with politicians and entertainers, and walked with the confidence of a man who believed he owned everything he looked at. As the head of the Chicago outfit, Giancana controlled rackets that stretched from Vegas to Havana, and his reach extended far beyond crime families. He had dirt on senators, leverage on casino bosses, and close ties to the CIA, but what he didn't have was Marilyn Monroe. That, according to rumors, began to gnaw at him. Giancana was obsessed with power, not just political power, but the power to control public image. And Marilyn, America's sweetheart, represented the kind of attention he could never buy. She was loved by millions, envied by women, and desired by some of the most powerful men in the world. To Giancana, she wasn't just a fantasy, she was an opportunity. Reports suggest that Giancana first took serious interest in Marilyn around 1960 when he learned of her growing connection to President John F. Kennedy. Giancana had helped JFK win that election, allegedly rigging votes in Illinois through union bosses and backdoor deals. And yet, the Kennedy brothers turned on the mob once they got into office. Bobby Kennedy, in particular, then Attorney General, made it his mission to destroy organized crime. That betrayal didn't sit well with Giancana, and suddenly, Marilyn Monroe, who was rumored to be romantically involved with both brothers, became a dangerous weapon, or a ticking time bomb. Multiple sources have claimed that Giancana wanted Marilyn close. Whether it was through charm, manipulation, or force, he needed someone in his pocket who could give him information or serve as leverage. Monroe's naivety made her vulnerable. Her desire for love, for validation, and for escape made her easy to isolate, and Giancana had a reputation for using women as pawns in his high-stakes political chess games. Some insiders say he never saw Marilyn as a person. She was a symbol of Hollywood power, of political influence, of total control. And in Giancana's world, symbols were either owned or destroyed. Over time, he began orchestrating scenarios to be closer to her. Through mutual acquaintances, particularly Frank Sinatra, he arranged for Marilyn to be invited to parties, private resorts, and secretive gatherings where mobsters rubbed shoulders with politicians. These weren't just social events. They were opportunities to watch her, listen to her, and learn who else was watching. The more Giancana learned, the more dangerous the game became. Because if Marilyn ever spoke about what she saw, about who she was with, about the secrets whispered in penthouses and behind closed doors, she wouldn't just ruin careers. She could burn down the entire empire, his included. And for a man like Giancana, there was only one response to that kind of threat: silence it before it spoke. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a singer. He was a brand, a symbol of cool confidence, charm, and old-school masculinity. But behind the tuxedos, stage lights, and swing tunes, Sinatra was also deeply entangled in the world of organized crime. And when it came to connecting the dots between Marilyn Monroe and the mob, he was the one holding the pen. Sinatra and Giancana had a long and complicated relationship. Publicly, they played it cool. Old friends from the Vegas scene, sharing drinks and laughing over poker chips. But privately, Sinatra served as a kind of unofficial ambassador between Hollywood and the mob. He had enough fame to walk into any room and enough connections to get things done. That made him invaluable to both worlds. By the late 1950s, Sinatra had assembled his iconic Rat Pack: Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, who just so happened to be married to JFK's sister. This wasn't just a group of entertainers. It was a power circle. They performed on stage, partied with politicians, and whispered secrets in dimly lit lounges where reporters weren't allowed. Marilyn, frequently invited into this circle, found herself surrounded by charmers, drinkers, and deal-makers, but none more dangerous than the ones lurking in the shadows behind them. It was at one of these exclusive gatherings, possibly at Sinatra's Palm Springs home, or the infamous Cal Neva Lodge, where Marilyn was introduced to Sam Giancana. Some accounts say the meeting was casual. Others suggest it was arranged, intentional. A quiet introduction to let Giancana get close. Marilyn, ever the people-pleaser, reportedly laughed at his jokes and charmed the room. She had no idea the man across from her wasn't just interested in her beauty. He was assessing her, like a boss sizes up an asset. The Cal Neva Lodge, co-owned by Sinatra, became a central hub for these meetings. Nestled along Lake Tahoe, the lodge was a glamorous hideout where stars and criminals mingled without press or prying eyes. Marilyn visited the resort multiple times, and it's believed she attended private parties there with mobsters, political figures, and even members of law enforcement. The line between fame and threat became almost impossible to distinguish. At first, Marilyn may have believed she was simply enjoying the perks of fame. Private jets, champagne, luxury cabins, the Rat Pack serenading her poolside. It felt like a fantasy. But these parties weren't innocent. They were power plays. Information was exchanged. Trust was tested. And every conversation was a calculated move in a larger game. Sinatra may not have intended to throw Marilyn to the wolves, but his world was built on blurred boundaries. By inviting her in, he unknowingly placed her at the center of something far more dangerous than a Hollywood scandal. Marilyn was no longer just an actress. She was now in a circle where secrets were currency, and loose lips could cost lives. And the more time she spent around the Rat Pack and their connections, the more those in power began to wonder. What did Marilyn know? Who was she talking to, and who might she tell? Because in this world, one wrong word could get you more than just bad press. It could get you buried. As Marilyn's fame grew, so did the shadows around her. By the early 1960s, whispers turned to murmurs, and those murmurs began to echo inside government buildings. She wasn't just a movie star anymore. Marilyn Monroe had become a liability, and the people watching her weren't just fans. They were federal agents, political operatives, and mobsters. FBI files released years after her death reveal that Marilyn had been under surveillance. Not just casually observed, monitored, tapped phone lines, recorded conversations, detailed memos. Officials were concerned about her rumored ties to communists, her mental health struggles, and most of all, her intimate relationships with the Kennedy brothers. The deeper she became involved with JFK and RFK, the more dangerous her presence became. But it wasn't just the government keeping tabs. According to multiple reports, figures in the mob, especially those close to Sam Giancana, had people watching her too. Surveillance wasn't about protection. It was about control. They needed to know who she was talking to, what she was saying, and if she might become a threat to their very delicate power balance. The paranoia around Marilyn only deepened when it became clear she wasn't playing by the rules. She was unpredictable, emotional. She spoke openly about her heartbreaks, her loneliness, and her desire to be heard. At one point, she reportedly threatened to hold a press conference and tell everything she knew about the Kennedys, the affairs, and the secrets whispered behind closed doors. To a woman scorned, that may have been a cry for help. But to men like Giancana, it was a declaration of war. Marilyn was no longer just entangled in mob influence. She was being boxed in by invisible walls, controlled, monitored, used. And whether she realized it or not, her every move was now being calculated by forces far beyond her control. It's one of the most whispered stories in American history. The love triangle that never officially existed. Marilyn Monroe, President John F. Kennedy, and his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. On paper, they were untouchable figures of power and charm. Behind the scenes, their connection to Marilyn was electric, messy, and eventually deadly. Marilyn first met JFK at a party hosted by actor Peter Lawford, who was married to JFK's sister. From that moment, their chemistry was undeniable. He was the most powerful man in the country. She was the most desired woman in the world. For Marilyn, the attraction wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She longed for connection, validation, and love. And JFK, with his charisma and confidence, gave her a fleeting sense of all three. But to the president, Marilyn was a risk, a beautiful distraction. According to reports, their affair was short-lived but intense, filled with late-night calls, secret rendezvous, and flirtatious letters. She even referred to him as Jack in conversations with friends and allegedly believed he might leave Jackie Kennedy for her. That illusion, as many would later say, was the beginning of her undoing. When JFK distanced himself, Robert Kennedy stepped in. Whether out of guilt, loyalty, or strategic maneuvering, RFK began spending more time with Marilyn. Some believe he was sent to calm her down, to control the fallout. Others suggest he and Marilyn developed their own relationship, perhaps even more intimate than the one she had with the president. What's undeniable is this: Marilyn became emotionally volatile. Friends noticed a shift. She was drinking more, crying often, and making threats, saying she would expose everything. She felt used, discarded, and betrayed. And in her eyes, the most powerful family in America had turned its back on her. That terrified the Kennedys and the mob. Giancana had helped JFK win the presidency, believing it would buy him protection. But when RFK declared war on organized crime, that protection evaporated. Suddenly, the mob had a score to settle. And Marilyn? She was the perfect pressure point. It wasn't just that she knew too much, it was that she might talk. And in the world she was now part of, That was more dangerous than anything else, because the people Marilyn had once loved now saw her as a liability, and in their circles, liabilities didn't last long. Among the many chilling rumors surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death, one stands out above the rest: the Red Diary. A simple notebook, allegedly filled with secrets so explosive it became the most dangerous object in Hollywood. Some say it never existed. Others believe it was the reason she died. According to former staff, friends, and investigators, Marilyn kept a personal diary where she wrote down everything: thoughts, feelings, and most alarmingly, details from private conversations with some of the most powerful men in the world. She supposedly recorded sensitive discussions about politics, national security, mob activity, and the inner workings of the Kennedy dynasty. One former housekeeper even described it as her insurance policy. Why would she write this down? Some believe Marilyn felt powerless, discarded by men who used her and abandoned by studios that once praised her. In writing, she found control. And perhaps if she documented the truth, she believed it might one day protect her, or expose the people who tried to silence her. The diary reportedly contained conversations with both John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, including references to Cuba, the Mafia, CIA operations, and even nuclear policy. If true, it was damning, not just to politicians, but to high-ranking officials who had built entire careers on secrecy. But here's where the story turns into a full-blown mystery. After Marilyn's death, the diary vanished. Law enforcement never recovered it. Her belongings were mysteriously reorganized. Phone records were missing. Even her room appeared staged by the time police arrived. People close to her swore the diary existed, but no one could produce it. And anyone who claimed to have seen it either changed their story or died under strange circumstances. One of the most vocal believers in the diary's existence was journalist Dorothy Kilgallen, who publicly questioned the official story of Marilyn's death. Kilgallen said she had seen parts of the diary and was preparing to publish her findings. But in 1965, she was found dead in her home under suspicious circumstances. Her notes, gone. To this day, the Red Diary has never been found. No copies, no scans, no pages, just whispers. But its absence only adds to the legend. If it truly existed, it may have been the one thing that tied everything together: the mob, the Kennedys, the surveillance, and the fear. And if someone wanted to protect those secrets, destroying the diary wouldn't be enough. They'd have to destroy the woman who wrote it. August 4th, 1962. Marilyn Monroe was found unresponsive in her Los Angeles home. The official cause? A barbiturate overdose. But almost immediately, nothing about that night made sense. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, originally claimed she went to bed early and noticed nothing unusual. But under pressure, she changed her story. She later said she had sensed something was wrong around 3 a.m., saw a light on under Marilyn's door, and called psychiatrist Dr. Ralph Greenson, who arrived, broke into the bedroom window, and found Marilyn's lifeless body clutching the telephone. Only, the details kept shifting. Why did it take hours for the police to be called? Why were there no pill bottles in the room, despite the claim she had overdosed on dozens of them? Why did her internal organs, which could have confirmed how the drugs were taken, go missing from the autopsy? According to LAPD logs, Monroe died around midnight. But her death wasn't reported until almost 4:30 a.m. That's a 4-hour gap, unaccounted for, unexplained, and suspiciously scrubbed of any clear timeline. More than a few eyewitnesses reported that Robert Kennedy was in Los Angeles that night. Some even claimed he visited Marilyn's home with 2 unknown men hours before she died. The official story denies he was anywhere near her, but those who lived nearby, including the son-in-law of her housekeeper, told a different story. He later claimed that RFK came to the house, argued with Marilyn, and left abruptly. Then there's the ambulance that allegedly arrived before the police were ever called. EMTs reportedly tried to revive her at the house before she mysteriously reappeared, dead, back in her room. These aren't the tales of conspiracy theorists. They're documented claims by former staff and first responders, many of whom stayed silent for decades out of fear. The room was clean. Too clean. No glass of water, no vomit, no signs of a violent reaction to pills. Forensic experts have since said the death scene didn't match the story. And that's why so many believe Marilyn didn't die from a desperate mistake, but from something much more deliberate. Someone wanted to send a message, and someone else wanted it buried. After Marilyn's death, the silence was deafening. Friends backed away. The Kennedys went quiet. The LAPD offered no follow-up. The press, usually rabid for scandal, moved on within days. It felt less like mourning and more like a cover-up. But behind the scenes, powerful men were panicking. Because if Marilyn had left behind proof, tapes, letters, a diary, then everything she knew could still come out. And if there was one thing the mob understood, it was damage control. Sam Giancana, already furious with the Kennedys over broken promises and FBI pressure, had reportedly seen Marilyn as leverage. But leverage that speaks freely? That becomes a liability. And in his world, liabilities didn't survive. Years later, Giancana was set to testify before a Senate committee investigating organized crime. Days before his appearance, he was shot in the mouth 6 times in what many called a message killing. A warning not just to him, but to anyone else who might talk. Marilyn's psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, a man who had deep ties to both Hollywood and intelligence figures, stopped speaking publicly about her death. Her close friends reported being followed, questioned, or intimidated. The few who dared to raise questions were labeled unstable, bitter, or delusional. But the fear didn't end there. Over the next few years, several people in Marilyn's orbit died under suspicious circumstances. Her press agent, her former assistant, even journalist Dorothy Kilgallen, who had vowed to reveal the truth. Each death further buried whatever secrets Marilyn had carried. For decades, theories swirled, and investigations were quietly shut down. Even the Freedom of Information Act couldn't uncover the full truth. Dozens of files remained sealed. Key testimonies were lost. Evidence was destroyed. The story became legend, a cautionary tale of beauty, power, and betrayal. And through it all, the one woman at the center of it all was remembered not for what she knew, but for how she died. Because Marilyn Monroe didn't just slip away into the night, she was erased, carefully, methodically, and permanently. If there was anyone bold enough to investigate Marilyn Monroe's death and live to tell the tale, it was Dorothy Kilgallen. A trailblazing journalist, TV personality, and columnist with deep political connections, Kilgallen wasn't just another gossip writer. She had access to Washington insiders, intelligence sources, and Hollywood's elite. And in the years following Marilyn's death, she became obsessed with one question: what really happened that night? Kilgallen had covered high-profile scandals before. She was the only journalist to ever privately interview Jack Ruby, the man who killed Lee Harvey Oswald. That alone made her a rare figure. Trusted enough by authorities to get close, but bold enough to question the official narrative. And once she turned her attention toward Marilyn Monroe and the Kennedys, the temperature in the room shifted. She publicly criticized the official story of Marilyn's overdose, pointing out its contradictions and inconsistencies in her column, which reached over 20 million readers. Kilgallen claimed to have sources inside both the justice system and Monroe's inner circle, who told her things that had never been released to the public. Things about secret visits, coded phone calls, and political pressure. She openly declared that Marilyn's death was not a suicide, but something darker. Behind the scenes, Kilgallen was working on a book, a manuscript that reportedly included explosive claims linking Marilyn's death to both the mob and the Kennedy administration. She confided in friends that she was about to blow the whole thing open. But before the book could be published, or even fully written, Kilgallen was found dead in her Manhattan apartment in November 1965. The cause? A lethal combination of barbiturates and alcohol, eerily similar to Marilyn's. But her family and colleagues immediately questioned the ruling. Dorothy didn't drink heavily. She rarely took sleeping pills. And perhaps most importantly, her interview notes, documents, and manuscript draft were all gone. No forced entry, no struggle, just silence. Her death was ruled accidental, case closed. But those who knew her best believed otherwise. Just like Marilyn, Dorothy Kilgallen got too close to the truth. And in that world, curiosity wasn't just dangerous, and it was fatal. Hidden along the border of California and Nevada, nestled beside the serene waters of Lake Tahoe, stood the Cal Neva Lodge, a glamorous escape for celebrities, and a playground for the mob. Co-owned by Frank Sinatra in the early 60s, the lodge wasn't just known for its five-star hospitality. It was known for what happened behind closed doors, secret deals, high-stakes poker, and powerful men deciding the fate of others over cocktails and cigars. This is where Marilyn Monroe re-enters the picture, for what may have been the final time. She visited the Cal Neva Lodge in the summer of 1962, just weeks before her death. On the surface, it looked like a getaway, a chance to relax with friends and escape the chaos of LA. But eyewitnesses described her differently: anxious, emotional, uncomfortable. She appeared sick, both physically and mentally drained, and far from her usual radiant self. Some claimed she was being watched. Others believed she was being manipulated. Multiple sources allege that she was brought there at the request of Giancana and Sinatra. The purpose? No one agrees. Some say it was to smooth things over between her and the Kennedys. Others suggest she was being pressured, to keep quiet, to hand over the red diary, or to be reminded of who really held the power. A few even believe she was being drugged. The lodge had underground tunnels, hidden rooms, and private suites, perfect for secrets, perfect for intimidation. That weekend, Marilyn allegedly had a breakdown. According to one staff member, she was heard sobbing uncontrollably behind her suite's locked doors. A nurse was brought in. A doctor followed. Within days, she was gone, rushed back to Los Angeles, where her final spiral began. What happened at the Cal Neva Lodge may never be fully known. But it was the last place Marilyn was seen in public. And for those who believe she was silenced, the Cal Neva wasn't just a resort. It was a trap. To understand how deep Marilyn Monroe was caught in the crossfire, you have to see the bigger picture. A high-stakes game of betrayal between the mob and the White House. In 1960, Sam Giancana helped John F. Kennedy win the presidency. That's not speculation. It's supported by multiple accounts, including government investigations and mob insiders. Giancana allegedly delivered key votes in Illinois through union muscle and political manipulation, expecting favors in return. But the mob's biggest mistake was trusting the Kennedys. As soon as JFK took office, his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, launched an all-out war on organized crime. Subpoenas, wiretaps, arrests, the hammer came down hard. Giancana felt betrayed, furious. And that's where Marilyn Monroe became more than a beautiful woman. She became a weapon. If Monroe really had been romantically involved with both brothers, and if she was as emotionally unstable as insiders claimed, then she was a live wire, a liability to the Kennedys, and an opportunity for Giancana. Mob informants have claimed that Marilyn was being used to gather intelligence on the president. Not spy-level espionage, but pillow talk, slips of the tongue, confidential conversations she may have overheard or even participated in, all recorded in that infamous red diary. The mob didn't need to destroy the Kennedys. They just needed leverage, a way to remind them that loyalty was expected and betrayal had consequences. But Marilyn didn't stay quiet. She allegedly threatened to expose the affairs, even hold a press conference. That's when panic set in. The Kennedys wanted distance. The mob wanted control, and Marilyn, caught between both, was quickly becoming too dangerous to live. Some theorists believe her death was a collaborative cover-up. The Kennedys didn't kill her. The mob didn't kill her. But they both benefited from her silence. The perfect crime? Maybe not. But the perfect solution to an inconvenient problem? Possibly. Because once Marilyn was gone, the pressure eased. The rumors faded. The files went dark. She was the casualty of a secret war she didn't even know she was part of. A starlet turned pawn, sacrificed in a power struggle that reached the highest levels of American life. Decades later, the mystery of Marilyn Monroe's death remains unresolved. Officially, it was an overdose. Tragic, accidental, unfortunate. But even today, the inconsistencies are impossible to ignore. Too many questions, too many missing records, and too many people who died before they could speak. Her autopsy report was incomplete. Some of her internal organs, including her stomach and small intestine, were mysteriously removed or lost, making it impossible to determine exactly how the drugs entered her system. Her phone records for the day before her death vanished. Her diaries, letters, and recordings were never found. Even the police report was altered, with timelines shifted and names omitted. And then there are the deaths, too many to brush off as coincidence. Dorothy Kilgallen, Peter Lawford, Dr. Greenson, people who were close to Marilyn or connected to the truth, gone within years of her passing. Theories abound: CIA involvement, mob retaliation, Kennedy cover-ups, each more chilling than the last, yet none fully proven. Freedom of Information Act requests have unearthed thousands of pages of documents, but many remain heavily redacted or sealed. Some believe the government is still hiding what it knows. Others believe the trail went cold long ago, that the key evidence was destroyed within hours of her death, and that the real story was buried with her. And perhaps the most haunting piece? We'll likely never know how much Marilyn really understood. Was she aware of how dangerous her connections had become? Did she realize she was being used by both sides? Or was she just a woman looking for love, caught in a game she never agreed to play? Her image remains iconic: blonde curls, red lips, shimmering gowns. But behind that glamour was a woman silenced not by tragedy, but by power. Because in the end, Marilyn Monroe didn't die from heartbreak or addiction. She died from knowing too much and trusting the wrong people with the truth.